It is August 17th, 2026, and the clock that everyone in Washington and Tehran has been watching for 2 straight months just hit zero. The 60-day memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran, the one signed on June 17th that was supposed to end this war and produce a permanent deal, has officially expired. And it expired the way most people who have been following this closely expected it to. Not with a signature, with a threat. Here's the headline that is doing the rounds right now. Donald Trump told Fox News that if Oman gets in the way of what the United States is trying to do in the Strait of Hormuz, in his words, we'll bomb the you-know-what out of them. He said it in a phone interview with Trey Yingst. He repeated a version of it hours later to reporters in the Oval Office, saying Oman hasn't behaved very well, but that the United States would, quote, handle them very easily, just like we do other things. Now, sit with that for a second, because Oman is not Iran. Oman is not a hostile state. Oman is one of the most consistently neutral, most trusted mediators in the entire Persian Gulf. It is the country that both Washington and Tehran have relied on for years to carry messages neither side would send directly. And the President of the United States just threatened to bomb it. Why? Because Oman and Iran had just reached their own arrangement. Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency said that Tehran and Muscat had agreed on a plan for how shipping traffic would move through the strait going forward. A Trump administration official told the outlet Semaphore that the real concern in Washington is that Oman and Iran might strike a deal involving a tolling scheme for the strait, a deal that cuts out the United States entirely. As that official put it, most countries in the region would be fine with that arrangement. But Trump wants to be the one who says he personally reopened the strait, without anyone else collecting a toll on the way. So the Oman threat is not really about Oman. It is about who gets to claim credit for control of one of the most important waterways on Earth. At the exact moment, the diplomatic framework that was supposed to settle that question has collapsed. And the strait itself tells you how bad things actually are on the water right now. According to the maritime tracking service Marine Traffic, only 13 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz over the entire weekend before the deadline. 13. Before this war began in February, tanker traffic through that strait ran into the dozens per day, carrying a meaningful share of the world's seaborne oil and gas. Right now, it has nearly ground to a halt, and oil markets are already responding, with prices ticking higher as traders watch the standoff between Washington and Tehran play out in real time. Let's rewind to how we actually got to this expiration date, because the sequence matters. The Memorandum of Understanding was signed June 17th as an interim framework to halt a military confrontation that by then had already been running for more than 3 months. Both sides pledged an immediate and permanent end to operations, agreed to respect each other's sovereignty, and committed to negotiating a final, comprehensive deal within 60 days, extendable only by mutual consent. The United States agreed to end its naval blockade within 30 days and eventually lift sanctions. Iran agreed to clear mines from the strait and let ships pass without charge for that 60-day window, and reaffirmed it was not seeking a nuclear weapon. It did not hold. Within about a month, Trump was already calling the MOU over, first suggesting it privately, then declaring it dead in mid-July while attending the NATO summit in Turkey. Iran's foreign ministry fired back the same day, calling continued American strikes a serious violation of the memorandum in its own right. From there, it was accusation after accusation. Iran began controlling and tolling traffic through the strait instead of clearing it, reportedly charging well over $1 million a ship at points earlier in the year. The United States, for its part, kept a naval posture in place that Tehran characterized as an ongoing blockade. By the time Monday's deadline actually arrived, neither government was pretending there was momentum left to save. Jared Kushner, who has been one of the lead American negotiators on this file, told Fox News directly that Iran, in his assessment, doesn't appear willing to finish the deal and give up its nuclear ambitions. His exact words were that Trump is willing to make a deal that could be great for the Iranian people, but that right now Iran isn't showing interest in doing something that makes sense for the United States. Kushner also said Iran has to stop trying to, in his phrase, hide certain cards and get certain concessions. Trump, in that same Fox interview, described the Iranian side almost like a card game, saying they're good poker players, but they're dying. Later in the Oval Office, he said he has no time schedule for a peace agreement, gave no indication he intends to push for an extension of the expired framework. Iran's response has been just as unyielding. Iran's deputy foreign minister, Kazem Garibabadi, posted on social media that the strait will remain, in his word, Iranian, and will only be opened or closed under Iran's command. That is not the language of a government preparing to hand over control of the waterway as part of a settlement. That is the language of a government treating the strait as leverage it intends to keep holding. There's a legal wrinkle sitting underneath all of this that most of the shouting is skipping past. Neither Iran nor Oman actually holds outright legal control over the Strait of Hormuz. As one maritime law expert put it in coverage of the story, Freedom of navigation prevails. That is the law. The strait is not Iranian property, and it is not Omani property in the ordinary sense of owning real estate. It sits under an international regime of maritime navigation. The Navy can physically control a waterway. Controlling it does not rewrite who has legal title to it, which means every side currently trying to dictate terms on Hormuz, Washington included, is asserting a kind of control that international law does not straightforwardly back up. Meanwhile, the deadline is landing in the middle of an already crowded diplomatic week for the same negotiators. Kushner spent nearly 4 hours in a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which he later described to Fox News as very, very good, saying they addressed what he called some valid concerns Netanyahu had raised. That came a day after Kushner held separate talks with Hamas leadership in Egypt over a competing U.S.-backed proposal for Gaza, a proposal Netanyahu had already rejected once. So the same small circle of American officials is trying to simultaneously hold together an Iran file that just expired and a Gaza file that is also stuck in the same 48 hours. In Congress, the Oman threat specifically has already produced pushback. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia said that when the Senate returns from its August recess, he intends to introduce a resolution that would bar military action against Oman. That is a senator from the president's own country moving, on the record, to legislatively block a strike on a nation Washington has treated as an ally for decades. So where does that leave things on the actual ground, as opposed to on cable news? The military and economic backdrop to this deadline is a crisis that has now been running since February 28th. Independent tracking of the broader Strait of Hormuz crisis has documented a sunk tugboat, more than a dozen merchant ships damaged, several of those abandoned, at least 2 ships captured, and more than a dozen seafarers killed or missing since the fighting began, alongside a global fuel and shipping disruption that oil markets are still pricing in. This is not an abstract diplomatic argument. It is a live conflict with a body count and a shipping lane that has effectively stopped functioning. So here is where August 17th, 2026 actually sits. The framework that was supposed to convert a shaky ceasefire into a lasting settlement has expired with no successor in place. The American side is threatening to bomb a neutral mediator over who gets credit for reopening a strait neither side legally owns outright. The Iranian side is publicly insisting the strait answers to Tehran alone. Oil is moving through in the single digits some days instead of the dozens it used to see. And the 2 men steering the American side of this, Trump and Kushner, spent the actual deadline day not focused on Iran in isolation, but juggling it against an unresolved Gaza negotiation and a tense sit-down with Israel's prime minister. Nobody involved is describing this as a deal that is close. They are describing it as a standoff that outlasted its own deadline. And the open question now is the same one that was open on June 17th when this framework was signed in the first place. Whether a maximum pressure posture from Washington and a maximum leverage posture from Tehran can actually produce a signed, lasting agreement, or whether both sides simply keep extending the argument past every deadline they set for themselves, while the strait that a fifth of the world's gas used to move through keeps sitting nearly empty.